Has anyone ever told you that you were the problem, just to avoid blame?
You know those Christmas mornings where the house smells like pine and cinnamon, and everyone's pretending to be one big happy family? Yeah, mine never felt like that. For 38 years, I've been the one scrubbing floors, slaving over turkey, and biting my tongue while my parents treated me like hired help and my sister like royalty. But last Christmas Eve, when Mom dropped her bomb about hosting 25 of Jessica's friends and expected me to play elf, something snapped. I nodded like always, but that night I clicked book now on a one-way flight to Florida. When they showed up to a ghost town of a kitchen, Mom's smirk vanished faster than the eggnog. Her face went pale as a ghost, but trust me, the real kicker was just warming up, and it's got everyone, including me, wondering if I went too far or not far enough. I've always been the reliable one in our family, the daughter who never rocked the boat, even when it felt like I was the only one rowing. Growing up in our modest split-level home in suburban Ohio, where the winters bite harder than the summer humidity, my parents, Karen and Robert Thompson, made it clear early on that Jessica was the star and I was the stagehand. Jessica, 3 years younger and twice as charming in their eyes, got the new clothes, the college fund, the get-out-of-jail-free passes for every screw-up, while I mopped up the messes, literally and figuratively. By my 30s, after a string of dead-end jobs that somehow always circled back to living at home to help out, I was cooking 3 meals a day, laundering clothes for the whole household, and listening to Dad's endless complaints about his retirement aches without a single thank you. It wasn't dramatic abuse, just this slow drip of expectation that wore me down like an old dish rag. I'd freelance as a graphic designer from the corner of the dining room table, squeezing in projects between loads of laundry and grocery runs, my income quietly funneled into the family pot without fanfare. Mom would pat my hand sometimes, saying, "You're such a good girl, Emily," but it always came with a follow-up chore, like polishing the silverware for the next gathering. Last December 23rd, the day before Christmas Eve, I was elbow-deep in dusting the fake snow off the mantel when Mom sauntered into the kitchen with that trademark smirk of hers, the one that said she knew she'd win no matter what. She leaned against the counter, sipping her afternoon tea, and announced it casual as checking the mail. "Emily, Jessica's bringing her friends over for Christmas. It's only 25 people, so no big deal. Only 25. As if I hadn't just spent the week prepping for our usual 10-person gathering, brining the turkey, baking pies from scratch, and wrapping gifts for relatives who barely remembered my name, and now she expected me to whip up feasts for a small army, clean up after them, and plaster on a smile while they trampled through our house like it was a frat party. Dad chuckled from the living room, not even looking up from his newspaper, muttering something about young folks having fun and Jessica, who was visiting from her apartment in Chicago, where she worked some vague marketing job that sounded more glamorous than it probably was, just grinned over her phone, probably texting invites right then and there. I felt that familiar heat rise in my chest, the kind that makes you want to hurl a turkey baster across the room, but instead I nodded. "Sure, Mom. I got it." My voice came out flat, but inside, a storm brewed, years of swallowed words bubbling up. They didn't notice how my hands shook as I finished the chores that evening, wiping down counters that would soon be buried under platters and spills, or how I slipped upstairs early, claiming a headache from the holiday rush. In my cramped bedroom at the end of the hall, the one with the lumpy mattress and posters from my high school days still peeling at the edges, because who had time to redecorate when there was always something to fix downstairs? I pulled out my laptop and stared at the screen. Florida. I'd seen the ads popping up endlessly, beaches lined with palm trees, warm sand underfoot, a world away from Ohio's gray slush and endless family obligations. My job paid decently enough to stash away a few thousand in a secret savings account they'd never known about, because God forbid I mention having my own money or plans that didn't revolve around them. It was my little rebellion, those quiet deposits from freelance gigs, building a cushion against the what-ifs. With trembling fingers, I searched for flights, my heart pounding like it did the first time I drove alone after getting my license at 16, only to come home and find Jessica's car prioritized in the garage. There it was, a red-eye deal for under $300, leaving that very night from the Columbus airport, landing in Tampa by dawn. No transfers, no fuss, just escape. I hit confirm before the guilt could crash in, my credit card details filling the form like a confession. As I packed a small suitcase, essentials only, a few changes of clothes, my laptop, and that worn journal where I'd scribbled frustrations over the years, I heard laughter drifting up from downstairs. Mom and Jessica planning their big bash without a thought for the invisible hands making it possible. Dad joined in, his voice carrying tales of past Christmases that always glossed over my role. The house felt smaller then, walls closing in with memories. The time I'd skipped my own promotion dinner to host Jessica's birthday party for 15, or the endless Thanksgivings where I ate last, after serving everyone else. By midnight, the house fell quiet, lights dimming one by one, and I crept out the back door, the cold air nipping at my skin as the Uber's headlights cut through the dark like a lifeline. The driver, a chatty guy from Pittsburgh hauling packages all season, didn't pry when I slid into the back seat with my bag, just cranked up some classic rock to fill the silence. The airport was a whirlwind of holiday travelers, families lugging overstuffed suitcases, kids tugging at Santa hats, the air thick with coffee and jet fuel. I checked in at a self-serve kiosk, my boarding pass printing with a satisfying whir, and found a corner gate to wait, blending into the crowd like I'd done at home for so long. Boarding felt surreal, the plane's hum vibrating through me as I settled into my middle seat, wedged between a snoring businessman and a mom wrangling toddlers. As we taxied down the runway, my phone buzzed insistently. A text from Jessica, "Where's the snack spread? Guests arriving in an hour. Don't forget the dip." I turned it off, a small smile tugging at my lips for the first time in what felt like months, the thrill of defiance warming me more than any blanket. But just as the wheels left the ground, another notification slipped through an airplane mode delay, Mom's voice message, her tone shifting from casual to frantic. "Emily? The kitchen's bare and these people are pulling up right now. Plates everywhere, no food. What did you do? Call me back." I could picture her face, that perpetual smirk draining to pale shock as the first cars honked in the driveway, expecting the Thompson hospitality machine to hum along without its operator. Her voice cracked at the end, a hint of real vulnerability, but I slipped the phone into my bag, staring out at the lights of Ohio shrinking below. The real surprise, the one I'd been piecing together in quiet moments, was still to come, something that would make her question every expectation she'd ever placed on me, leaving us all hanging on what came next. Touching down in Tampa International Airport as the first rays of sunlight pierced the humid Florida sky on Christmas morning, I stepped off the plane into an embrace of warm air thick with the scent of ocean salt and jet exhaust. A stark contrast to the biting cold I'd left behind in Ohio, where snow would be piling up against the windows of our family home by now, trapping everyone inside with their expectations and unmet plans. The terminal buzzed with bleary-eyed travelers exchanging gifts and hurried greetings, but I moved through it all like a ghost finally unchained, my small suitcase wheels humming softly against the tiled floor as I followed signs to the rental car desk, where I picked up a compact sedan for the drive to the beachside and I'd impulsively booked during a layover search on my phone, the kind of place advertised with photos of swaying palms and infinity pools that promise solitude amid the holiday frenzy. Rita, the owner, a weathered woman in her 60s with sun-kissed skin and a no-nonsense ponytail, met me at the door of the Seabreeze Inn, her eyes narrowing slightly at my disheveled appearance before she broke into a knowing smile and handed over the key to a ground-floor room overlooking the Gulf, commenting casually that she could spot family runaways from a mile away because she'd been one herself back in the 70s, fleeing a similar mess up north for the promise of endless summers. Settling into the room with its crisp white linens, seashell accents on the walls, and a balcony door that opened to the rhythmic crash of waves, I finally allowed myself to exhale fully for the first time in hours. The weight of the flight lifting as I unpacked my few belongings and collapsed onto the bed, sleep claiming me almost immediately in a deep, dreamless void that lasted until mid-morning when the sun climbed high enough to filter through the sheer curtains and rouse me with its insistent warmth. Waking to the unfamiliar sound of seagulls calling overhead and the distant laughter of beachgoers starting their day, I reached for my phone, which I'd kept powered off during the flight to avoid the inevitable barrage, and powered it back on only to watch notifications explode across the screen like fireworks gone wrong, a cascade of missed calls from Mom's number stacking up to 12, interspersed with texts from Jessica that evolved from irritated queries about the missing appetizers to outright accusations of sabotage, each message painting a vivid picture of the chaos unfolding back home without me there to orchestrate the usual seamless holiday machine. Dad had chimed in with a single voice message, his gravelly voice laced with uncharacteristic worry as he described the living room filling up with Jessica's friends, young professionals from her Chicago circle clad in trendy sweaters and carrying bottles of wine, all expecting the spread of deviled eggs, cheese platters, and mulled cider that I'd typically have ready hours in advance, only to find the kitchen counters bare except for a half-empty coffee pot and a note I'd left behind in haste about running an errand, which now seemed like a cruel tease in retrospect. Mom's texts were the most frantic, detailing how the guests had arrived in waves starting around noon, cars lining the driveway and spilling onto the street, their chatter turning to confused murmurs when they realized there was no host to greet them properly. No Emily to direct traffic and refill glasses, leaving Karen to improvise with whatever canned goods she could scrounge from the pantry while Dad retreated to his armchair with a grunt of frustration, his bad knee preventing him from pitching in more than a token effort. Reading through it all while sipping strong black coffee that Rita had brewed in the communal kitchen, I felt a twisted mix of vindication and creeping guilt wash over me, the kind that makes you question if your long overdue stand was worth the fallout, especially on a day meant for joy and reconciliation. Yet the images of them scrambling, Mom's meticulously curated Christmas village display now shoved aside for extra seating, Jessica's perfect social media facade cracking under the strain, brought a wry smile to my lips, a small victory in the battle against years of being the family's unspoken backbone. Over a simple breakfast of fresh fruit and yogurt on the balcony, where the sea breeze carried hints of sunscreen and freedom, I began to plot the next steps of what I hoped would be a clever, non-confrontational revenge. Not the explosive confrontation I'd fantasized about in darker moments, but something subtler that would force them to confront their reliance on me without my physical presence to absorb the blame. Starting with a quick login to my banking app to check the balance of that secret savings account I'd nurtured like a hidden garden over the past 5 years. Freelance graphic design work had been my lifeline, projects for small businesses and online clients trickling in steadily enough to build a nest egg of nearly $15,000. Money I'd squirreled away from paychecks after covering the household expenses Mom always forgot to reimburse, transfers done quietly through apps they didn't know I used because explaining my financial independence would have invited demands for more contributions rather than congratulations on my prudence. With that cushion confirmed, I felt emboldened to escalate the disruption back home, dialing up the online grocery service where I'd pre-ordered supplies for the holiday feast just days earlier and canceling the delivery with a polite excuse about a change in plans, rerouting the massive haul of hams, stuffing mixes, and desserts to a charity drop-off in Columbus instead, ensuring that whatever chaos they faced wouldn't be alleviated by my foresight. It was a petty move, I knew, but the humor in envisioning Mom's face, usually so composed in her apron, directing operations like a general, now flushed with embarrassment as she ordered pizza for 25 unexpected mouths, made the guilt recede just a bit, replaced by a spark of empowerment that had me laughing softly to myself while watching pelicans dive for fish in the waves below. As the afternoon unfolded in lazy stretches of sunbathing and a solitary walk along the shore, where seashells crunched underfoot and the water lapped at my toes in cool invitation, the messages from home continued to pour in, shifting tones from anger to negotiation in a way that revealed the cracks in their united front more clearly than any argument ever had, with Jessica sending a string of emojis-laden apologies that rang false even through the screen, claiming the party was no big deal. Now that everyone had pitched in, but attached photos showed otherwise, the coffee table littered with half-eaten takeout and wilted garlands sagging from overuse. Dad's follow-up call went to voicemail while I was out, his message pleading in that gruff way of his for me to cut the nonsense and come back before your mother has a meltdown, evoking memories of past holidays where his rare vulnerability had always pulled me back into line, making me the peacemaker who smoothed over Jessica's latest drama or Mom's overlooked slights, but this time, I let it sit unanswered, wrestling with the internal tug-of-war between the comfort of old roles and the exhilarating unknown of charting my own path. By evening, as I treated myself to a seafood dinner at a nearby shack where the owner shared stories of escaped snowbirds finding new lives in the tropics, Jessica's next text arrived, this one more personal and seemingly contrite. I'm really sorry if we dumped too much on you, come home. Dad's knee is acting up bad, and we miss your cooking. Let's talk, sis. The words hit like a practiced hook, stirring that familiar protective instinct, but something about the timing felt off. The message time-stamped after the photo she'd sent earlier showing the house still lively. And a quick cross-check with a mutual friend's social media update confirmed the party raged on without mention of any health crisis, revealing Jessica's lie as clearly as a poorly photoshopped image in one of my design gigs. My blood simmered with fresh betrayal, fueling the resolve to push forward with a response that was cryptic yet pointed. The real surprise is coming soon. Tell Mom to check the mail tomorrow. Just as my phone lit up with an incoming call from home, Mom's voice on the line trembling with a mix of relief and urgency. Emily, thank God, Jessica says you're upset, but there's a family secret we need to share before things go too far. Please, don't shut us out now. The morning after Mom's urgent call, with the Florida sun already baking the wooden planks of the inn's balcony and casting long shadows across the dunes, I sat nursing a mug of herbal tea that Rita had steeped strong enough to chase away the remnants of a restless night, her casual advice from breakfast echoing in my head about how family secrets were like buried treasure chests, sometimes full of gold, sometimes just rusty chains that kept you anchored to the same spot. The phone lay face down on the table beside me, its screen dark since I'd let Mom's plea go to voicemail after that initial ring, the temptation to answer warring with a deeper caution honed from years of their emotional manipulations disguised as concern. Each unanswered buzz a small act of self-preservation that felt both liberating and lonely under the vast blue sky stretching out to meet the endless gulf. Waves rolled in with mechanical precision, eroding the sand in patterns that mirrored my swirling thoughts, and I replayed her words in my mind. The family secret dangled like a carrot on a string, promising explanations for the uneven burdens I'd shouldered since childhood, yet reeking of the same old tactics that had me cleaning up Jessica's messes while she jetted off to brunches and networking events in Chicago, her life a highlight reel of Instagram posts that Mom forwarded with proud captions. Ignoring the pull to dive back into the fray, I focused instead on weaving the next thread of my revenge, something practical and pointed that would underscore their dependence without requiring my return. Starting with a call to the local florist service I'd spotted online during my beach walk the day before, ordering an extravagant delivery of poinsettias and holiday wreaths to the house, but addressed to Jessica's work address in the city, complete with a card reading from the family you left hanging. Enjoy the cheer, ensuring the bill hit her credit card and forced her to explain the mix-up to her boss amid the post-holiday slump. As the order confirmed with a cheerful beep, I allowed myself a chuckle at the image forming in my head. Jessica, usually so polished in her pencil skirts and power heels, fumbling through an office full of curious colleagues with armloads of festive foliage that screamed domestic drama rather than professional perk, a humorous payback for all the times she'd dumped party planning on me while claiming a headache from her stressful job. The kind of lighthearted jab that eased the knot in my stomach without crossing into outright cruelty. But the levity faded quickly as new messages trickled in throughout the morning, painting a deteriorating picture of the home front that tugged at the frayed edges of my resolve, with Dad sending a photo of the living room in disarray. Empty chip bags and soda cans scattered like battlefield debris from the impromptu feast they'd pieced together from neighbors' pity offerings and a last-minute run to the corner store, his caption simple but loaded. Miss your touch. Kid, house feels empty without you. Empty without me? The irony burned, recalling countless evenings when I'd slink upstairs after midnight cleanups, the house silent except for my own exhausted sighs, while they lounged in front of the TV critiquing my efforts like armchair critics at a bad play. Jessica followed with voice notes that oscillated between whiny complaints about the guests overstaying their welcome, stories of one friend spilling red wine on the heirloom tablecloth I'd starched just last week, another raiding the liquor cabinet for shots that left Dad dozing through the afternoon, and half-hearted invitations to join a video call for Christmas toasts. Her voice syrupy with that false camaraderie she'd mastered to get her way since we were kids sharing a room, me on the top bunk folding her clothes while she scrolled fashion magazines. By midday, as I ventured out for a swim in the inn's small pool, the cool water shocking my skin and clearing my head like a reset button, the family's dynamics began to unravel in real time through a group chat that lit up my waterproof phone case. Revelations slipping out in unguarded bursts that revealed more about their vulnerabilities than any confrontation ever had. Mom described how the 25 guests, a mix of Jessica's work buddies and college acquaintances she'd roped in for clout, had turned the gathering into an all-day affair, demanding board games and playlist control that stretched into the evening. Leaving her exhausted from playing gracious host without her usual sous chef, her texts laced with uncharacteristic admissions like, "I never realized how much you handled until now, sorry doesn't cover it." Dad chimed in sporadically, his messages shorter and gruffer, mentioning his knee swelling from standing too long to compensate, which introduced the dilemma gnawing at me from afar. Was this the real health scare Jessica had fabricated yesterday, or just another layer of guilt to reel me back, the uncertainty making my strokes in the pool feel labored as I weighed the cost of my absence against the freedom it bought me? The humor crept in through the absurdity of their reports, one guest mistaking the garage for a smoking lounge, another attempting to bake cookies from a box mix and setting off the smoke alarm, forcing an evacuation that had neighbors peeking over fences with raised eyebrows, scenarios I'd usually defuse with quick thinking and a mop, but now watched unfold like a sitcom I'd opted out of, leaving me torn between schadenfreude and a pang of worry for Dad, whose retirement had already been shadowed by doctor's visits I drove him to without complaint. Refreshed but restless after the swim, I dried off and settled into a shaded lounge chair with my laptop, intending to catch up on freelance emails, but instead finding myself probing deeper into the family secret Mom had teased. Starting with a discreet search of public records through a site Lila had recommended during our brief text exchange the night before, her real estate savvy uncovering threads I hadn't pulled before. What emerged pieced together a picture of quiet desperation. The house mortgage, originated during Dad's layoff in the early 2000s, had been refinanced multiple times with my unknowing co-signature buried in the fine print of family help documents Mom had me sign at 18, my steady contributions from odd jobs back then quietly covering payments, while Jessica's allowances funded her whims, a revelation that hit harder than the sun's glare reflecting off the water. It explained the lean years I'd shouldered alone, grocery budgets stretched thin. Because Jessica needed new books for school, and the way Mom's smirks masked a deeper resentment toward her own choices, now weaponized to lure me home with promises of truth. As the afternoon waned, I drafted a neutral reply to the group chat, "Glad you're managing." Needed space to think, but held off sending, the growing conflict manifesting in a call from an old family friend who'd stopped by the house unannounced. Her voicemail describing the scene as touch and go, with Jessica snapping at guests and Mom retreating to the kitchen for a private cry, details that amplified the uncertainty and made my revenge feel less like justice and more like a gamble with real fallout. Just as I rose to head inside for a late lunch of Rita's homemade conch salad, heavy with lime and fresh herbs that burst on the tongue like unexpected honesty, Mom's next voicemail arrived, her voice steadier but edged with desperation. "Emily, we've opened up to each other here. The secrets about your grandmother's will and why we favored Jessica. It's not what you think, and it changes everything if you come back before the bank's notice hits tomorrow." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud rolling in over the horizon, a cliffhanger that pulled me toward the edge of revelation, but also deeper into the web of exploitation I'd only begun to untangle, leaving me staring at the phone, heart pounding with the question of whether to dive in or let the waves carry me further away. Sunrise painted the Gulf in hues of pink and gold the following day, a deceptive serenity that belied the storm brewing in my mind as I lingered on the balcony with a steaming cup of Rita's chicory coffee, its bold bitterness grounding me against the onslaught of doubts that had kept me awake half the night after Mom's voicemail about grandmother's will, the revelation teasing at layers of favoritism I'd long suspected but never confronted, like the way Jessica always got the antique locket from Grandma's jewelry box, while I inherited the tarnished silverware that ended up in daily use for family dinners I prepared. The beach stretched out empty in the early hour, joggers dotting the sand like distant figures in a dream, and I scrolled through the latest influx of messages from home, each one layering more chaos onto the canvas of their unraveling Christmas, with Jessica detailing in frantic bursts how the unexpected poinsettia delivery had arrived at her office mid-morning meeting the day before, forcing her to haul the oversized pots to the break room while coworkers snickered and her boss raised an eyebrow at the invoice debited from the company card she'd mistakenly linked, turning what should have been a professional win-down into an awkward spectacle that left her fending off questions about her personal drama for the rest of the shift. Dad's updates were sparser but no less vivid, describing how the house had cleared out by evening only for a second wave of stragglers to return for leftover night, raiding the fridge of whatever scraps remained and turning the kitchen into a war zone of mismatched plates and sticky counters that no one else stepped up to tackle, his knee throbbing from the extra hours on his feet playing reluctant host, a situation that amplified my internal dilemma as I weighed the satisfaction of their discomfort against the very real possibility that my absence was exacerbating his pain more than I'd intended, making me question if this revenge was evolving into something sharper than the witty nudge I'd envisioned. Rita joined me briefly with a plate of sliced mangoes, her weathered hands steady as she shared a story from her own escape years ago, how she'd driven cross-country from a Pennsylvania mining town much like our Ohio suburb, leaving behind a mother who favored the prodigal son and a pile of unspoken resentments, her words resonating with the quiet alliance forming in my resolve to push forward rather than fold, especially after I confided in her about the mortgage twist Lila had uncovered, prompting Rita to suggest I loop in my cousin for more leverage, since family outsiders often saw the patterns clearest. Emboldened by that nudge, I texted Lila right then, arranging a midday meetup at her Orlando office an hour's drive away, the journey giving me time to reflect on the escalating setups I'd orchestrated from afar. Like the anonymous tip I'd sent to the neighborhood HOA about the overflowing trash bins from the party, nothing malicious, just enough to trigger a fine that would hit Mom's pride harder than her wallet, a clever redirection of the disorder they'd imposed on me for years, complete with photos of the mess I'd pulled from Jessica's earlier snaps to make the report airtight. The drive south on the sun-dappled interstate, windows down to let in the briny air mixed with pine from passing groves, allowed my thoughts to wander to lighter absurdities, like imagining Dad's face when the utility flicker I'd scheduled kicked in that evening. Lights dimming during whatever tense family debrief they were attempting, forcing them to confront the butt-kissing routines I'd maintained without credit, the humor in their fumbling with flashlights and candles providing a brief counterpoint to the growing ache of isolation that made every mile feel like a step deeper into uncharted emotional territory. Lila's office buzzed with the hum of printers and phone rings when I arrived, her warm hug cutting through the air-conditioned chill as she ushered me into a back room cluttered with file boxes and maps of Florida properties, her no-nonsense demeanor a balm as she spread out documents confirming the depth of the house entanglement. My name not just co-signed, but primary on the deed after a refinance Mom had engineered a decade back to cover Jessica's community college tuition shortfall payments, siphoned from my freelance earnings under the guise of shared responsibility, a betrayal that twisted the knife of favoritism into something financial and unforgiving. Over sandwiches from a deli down the block, heavy with roast beef and tangy mustard that evoked childhood picnics we'd shared as cousins before life pulled us apart. Lila outlined a plan for escalation, suggesting I prepare a formal letter asserting my equity claim, something witty in its politeness that would arrive with the next mail drop, paired with a redirect of any incoming holiday cards and gifts to a local shelter in their name, turning their social obligations into unintended charity while spotlighting the imbalance. Her support felt like the alliance I'd craved, a twist that bolstered my confidence without the loneliness of solo plotting. Yet as we talked, she gently probed the harshness of my choices, wondering aloud if the family's fractures, evident in Jessica's latest text about a blowout argument over blame, warranted a pause for dialogue, her words planting seeds of doubt that made me second-guess the cleverness of my moves, especially when Dad called mid-lunch with a voice thick from pain meds, pleading softly for my return to sort this mess before it breaks us all, his vulnerability clashing with memories of his indifference during my own crises, like the time I lost a big design contract and he dismissed it as women's work, while praising Jessica's latest promotion. Back at the inn by late afternoon, the sun dipping toward the horizon in a blaze that mirrored the heat of unresolved tension, I implemented Lila's ideas with a mix of resolve and reluctance, mailing the equity notice via overnight courier and confirming the gift redirects through an online portal, each click a step toward reclaiming what was mine, but also a risk of widening the rift beyond repair. The light vulgarity of my inner monologue surfacing as I pictured Jessica's face upon discovering her Amazon wish list rerouted to strangers serves her right for playing princess while I played maid, though the thought soured quickly with reports from a neighbor's text chain I'd joined years ago, detailing how the family dinner that night devolved into raised voices and slammed doors, Mom accusing Jessica of poor planning, Dad withdrawing into silence, the fractures I'd indirectly caused now threatening to shatter the fragile holiday facade entirely. As evening settled with the call of crickets and the soft glow of string lights along the beach, uncertainty coiled tighter in my chest, the impending revenge feeling both inevitable and ill-advised. A dilemma that had me pacing the room until Mom's desperate voicemail cut through the quiet just after the courier's estimated delivery. Emily, the package is here, the house papers, the redirects, Jessica's in tears, and we're losing it all. What more do you want from us before this ends in court? The first light of dawn crept over the horizon like a hesitant visitor, turning the Gulf waters into a shimmering sheet of silver as I sat on the edge of the bed in Rita's inn. The weight of Mom's voicemail from the night before pressing down heavier than the humid air seeping through the cracked window, her words about the package and potential court battles echoing in the quiet room where seashells rattled softly in the breeze from an open fan. Sleep had come in fits, haunted by visions of the family home fracturing under the strain I'd engineered, the equity notice demanding acknowledgement of my unpaid contributions tallied over years of freelance checks funneled into their comfort, the gift redirects stripping away the superficial trappings of their holiday entitlement, and now this looming thread of legal lines drawn in the sand that made my clever setups feel less like witty retribution and more like a declaration of war on the very bonds I'd once cherished despite their imbalances. Rita had knocked earlier with a tray of scrambled eggs and toast slathered in guava jelly, her knowing glance urging me to face the music on your terms before she headed out for her morning market run, leaving me alone with the phone that buzzed intermittently through the night, each vibration a reminder of the dilemmas piling up like unopened mail, Dad's health truly flaring from the stress, Jessica's tears perhaps genuine for once, and Mom's desperation cracking the facade of control she'd wielded since I was old enough to hold a sponge. As I picked at the cooling food, the internal conflict raged. Had I gone too far in this escape-turned-reckoning, turning a simple flight to Florida into a catalyst for irreparable rifts? Or was this the necessary shake-up to force them to see me as more than the dutiful shadow orbiting their lives? A question that gnawed deeper with every replay of the voicemail, her voice breaking on the word everything as if the house itself might slip away like sand through fingers. By mid-morning, with the sun climbing to bake the beach into a haze of heat and distant laughter from arriving tourists, I steeled myself for the climax of it all. dialing the video call to home with fingers that trembled slightly despite the resolve built over these fugitive days, the screen flickering to life with Mom's face filling the frame first. Pale and drawn in the kitchen where counters still bore faint stains from the party's aftermath, her eyes red-rimmed as if she'd aged a decade in. The blur of disrupted traditions. Dad hovered behind her in his worn cardigan, looking frail against the familiar backdrop of the breakfast nook where I'd served countless meals without fanfare, and Jessica lurked off to the side, her usual poise shattered into hunched shoulders and averted gaze. The three of them clustered like suspects in a lineup awaiting judgment from the daughter who'd vanished without a trace. I kept my tone even, conversational as if discussing weekend plans rather than dismantling a lifetime of dynamics. Starting with the immediate fallout, the package was just the start, the redirects on gifts to the shelter in your name, the HOA fine for the mess you left. Even the utility dip last night to give you a taste of scrambling in the dark like I did every holiday. Mom gasped, hand flying to her mouth, while Dad muttered something about overkill, but I pressed on, weaving in the humor to soften the edges without dulling the point. The image of their yard soon to be overrun by those auto-inflating Santa inflatables I'd ordered as a final flourish, cheap ones from a Black Friday deal that would flop and flail come morning, turning the pristine lawn into a ridiculous spectacle for neighbors to gossip over, a light-hearted jab at the chaos they'd expected me to contain. Jessica finally spoke, her voice small. It's too much, we get it now, but the lie in her eyes, remnants of the financial siphoning Lila had detailed, kept my guard up, the witty revenge landing with satisfying thuds that evoked reluctant chuckles even from Dad, who admitted through a wry smile that the poinsettias at her office had become the talk of Jessica's firm. As the call deepened, the real revelations surfaced like tides pulling back to expose hidden rocks, tying together the clues I'd chased from Ohio's slush to Florida's sands. The family's secret mom had dangled not some dramatic adoption twist, but a pragmatic favoritism rooted in fear. Grandma's will dividing assets unevenly because she'd seen Jessica's potential in business school dreams while viewing my path as the steady caretaker who'd always stay close, a decision that led to the mortgage maneuvers and my unwitting subsidization of their choices, all while Jessica's opportunities drained what should have been shared inheritance. I'd claimed my full share yesterday through Lila's contacts, enough liquid assets to buy out the house or vanish entirely, the knowledge hitting them like a rogue wave as I explained it calmly. It's not revenge for the smirk or the 25 guests. It's for every nod I gave while you treated me like the help, and now, with the papers filed, the choice is yours on how we move forward. Their reactions cascaded, Mom's tears flowing freely as she apologized for the lean years post-Dad's layoff. When my earnings became the invisible glue, Dad nodding solemnly, his pride cracking to reveal regret for not speaking up. Jessica breaking down with admissions of jealousy masked as entitlement, confessing she'd envied my quiet strength all along. The air thickened with raw emotion, humor fading into heavy silences broken only by the distant hum of their fridge. The dilemmas I'd wrestled now mirrored in their faces as they grappled with the cost of their oversights, making viewers like you perhaps side against my unyielding stance, wondering if forgiveness should temper the justice or if boundaries demand such stark lines. We lingered on the call through lunch, voices softening into tentative plans, me staying in Florida a while longer to sort my head, them promising therapy sessions and equitable splits without my prompting, yet as the screen went dark hours later, the ambiguity settled like fog over the beach, unanswered questions lingering in the salt-tinged air. Would they truly change, redistributing the emotional labor I'd carried alone, or would old patterns resurface like stubborn weeds in spring? I walked the shore at dusk, waves erasing my steps as the first Santas inflated back home per the delivery alert on my phone, their flailing forms a final, whimsical echo of the upheaval, leaving me, and maybe you, pondering if one woman's flight could rewrite a family script, or if the real surprise was discovering that freedom came laced with the ache of what might never heal.